I never meant to find that video. Some things are better left buried in dusty boxes, forgotten in attic corners. But on that sweltering summer afternoon, while searching for my old ballet shoes, I stumbled upon the truth that would shatter my 6-year-old world. My name is Lila, and this is the story of how I discovered I was never meant to be enough. The attic was stuffy, dust particles dancing in the rays of sunlight that filtered through the small window. I'd been rummaging through cardboard boxes, determined to find my pink ballet slippers for show and tell tomorrow, when I came across an unmarked VHS tape. Curious, I carried it downstairs to our rarely used family room, where our ancient VCR still sat beneath the TV. The screen flickered to life, and there were my parents, looking younger but unmistakable. Mom's hair was shorter, Dad still had that mustache he'd later shave off. They were sitting on our old green couch, beaming at the camera. "We're so excited to share our wonderful news," Mom was saying, her hand resting on her stomach. "After years of trying, we're finally expecting our son." My father squeezed her shoulder. "The doctors confirmed it yesterday. A boy. Finally, a chance to pass on the Marlowe name. Our family will be complete," Mom added, wiping away happy tears. I sat there, cross-legged on the carpet, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. This had to be when Mom was pregnant with my younger brother, Caleb. But something wasn't adding up. Timestamp on the video showed it was from 14 years ago. Caleb was only 2. That's when it hit me. They'd been trying for a boy before I was born. I was their first attempt, their first disappointment. "Lila? What are you watching?" I jumped at my grandmother Violet's voice. She stood in the doorway, a basket of folded laundry in her arms. When she saw the screen, the basket slipped from her grasp, scattering clean clothes across the floor. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, rushing to turn off the TV. "You weren't supposed to see that." "They wanted a boy," I said, my voice small. "Before me. They always wanted a boy." Grandma Violet knelt beside me, her arthritis forgotten as she pulled me into her arms. She smelled like lavender and fresh bread, but even her familiar comfort couldn't stop the tears that came. "Your parents," she started, then stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes adults get fixed ideas about what they want. But that doesn't mean. Is that why they sent me to live with you?" I asked, pulling back to look at her face. "Because I wasn't the boy they wanted?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. For the past year, I'd been living with Grandma Violet while my parents got the nursery ready for Caleb. I thought it was because they needed space or because I was special enough to help Grandma with her garden and her baking. Now I understood. They'd been starting over with their do-over baby. "Listen to me," Grandma Violet said firmly, taking my small hands in hers. "You are perfect exactly as you are. Some people are too blind to see the treasure right in front of them." But I barely heard her. In my mind, I was replaying every distant hug, every distracted "that's nice, dear," every time they'd been too busy to attend my school events. It all made sense now. That night, as Grandma tucked me into bed in what had become my room, I asked, "Do I have to go back home when the baby's bigger?" She hesitated, smoothing my hair back from my forehead. "We'll figure it out together, sweet pea. Whatever happens, you'll always have me." I nodded, but inside, something had shifted. That little girl who desperately wanted her parents' approval began to fade, replaced by someone harder. Someone who understood that some things had to be earned or taken. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long game I'd learned to play very, very well. 2 years passed at Grandma Violet's before my parents decided it was time for me to come home. I was 8 now and, according to Mom, old enough to be helpful. Those words should have warned me about what was coming. The house felt different when I walked in. Toys scattered across the floor, cheerful alphabet blocks decorating every surface, and the constant soundtrack of Caleb's babbling filled the air. My room had been converted into a playroom, my things relocated to the smaller guest room at the end of the hall. "We thought Caleb needed the space more," Mom explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "You understand, don't you, sweetie?" I nodded because that's what good girls do. But understanding and accepting are two very different things. My new role became clear within days. While Mom and Dad fawned over every gurgle and step Caleb took, I became his shadow. Watch your brother. Make sure he doesn't put that in his mouth. Why weren't you paying attention when he tried to climb the bookshelf? One particularly hot afternoon, Mom asked me to take Caleb to the park. He was 2 now, full of energy and absolutely fearless. I sat on a bench, watching him toddle around the playground when Sarah from my old class approached. Lila, where have you been? We missed you at school. For a moment, I forgot my responsibilities, caught up in catching up with my old friend. We talked about our favorite teachers, the new slide in the schoolyard, the upcoming talent show. Felt normal. Felt like being 8 again. Then I heard the scream. Caleb had climbed to the top of the play structure and was teetering on the edge. My heart stopped. I ran, but I wasn't fast enough. He fell, landing with a thud that seemed to echo across the playground. The next few hours were a blur of emergency room lights and my parents' angry voices. Caleb was fine, just a sprained wrist and a few bruises, but you'd think I'd pushed him myself from the way Mom and Dad reacted. How could you be so irresponsible? Dad's voice boomed through the hospital corridor. He could have been killed. I only looked away for a minute, I whispered, but Mom cut me off. A minute is all it takes. We trusted you with one thing, Lila. One simple thing. A nurse passing by gave me a sympathetic look, but quickly hurried past. I stood there, shoulders hunched, as my parents continued their tirade. Through the emergency room window, I could see Caleb happily playing with a toy car, his wrist wrapped in a bright blue cast, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding. That night, after everyone was asleep, I crept down to the kitchen for a glass of water. I heard Mom's voice drifting from the living room. Maybe we made a mistake bringing her back so soon, she was saying softly. She's clearly not ready for this responsibility. What choice do we have? Dad replied. We can't afford a nanny, and your mother's too old to handle Caleb full-time. I just thought, I hoped she'd be more mature by now. More like the son we wanted? I whispered to myself, completing her unspoken thought. I didn't wait to hear the rest. Climbing back upstairs, I paused at Caleb's room. He was sleeping peacefully, his injured arm cradled against his chest. It wasn't his fault, really. He was just a toddler, living the life our parents had always wanted to give their child. Their real child. In my new, smaller room, I pulled out the phone Grandma Violet had given me for emergencies. My fingers hovered over her number, but I stopped myself. I couldn't run back to her every time things got hard. Besides, I was starting to understand something important. If I wanted my parents' approval, I'd have to earn it. And if I couldn't earn it, well, maybe I could make them regret taking me for granted. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, seeing something harder in my eyes than before. Game on, I whispered to my reflection. Let's show them what the disappointing daughter can do. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of a plan that would take years to unfold but would change everything. By 13, I'd learned to move silently through our house, becoming a ghost in my own home. That's how I happened to overhear the conversation that would change everything. Again, I was heading to the kitchen for a late-night snack when I heard voices from Dad's study. The door was cracked open, letting a thin slice of light spill into the darkened hallway. The market's been good to us, Dad was saying. If we start investing now, we'll have enough saved for Caleb's college fund by the time he's ready. I froze mid-step. College fund? They'd never mentioned anything about college funds to me. What about that private high school you mentioned? Mom asked. The one with the excellent sports program? Riverdale Prep? It's expensive, but with some portfolio adjustments, we could manage it. Caleb's showing real promise in baseball. This could be his ticket to a scholarship. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering. 7-year-old Caleb had just started Little League last month, and they were already planning his entire future. What about Lila's college? Mom's voice was quieter now. She'll be starting in a few years. There was a pause, followed by the sound of ice cubes clinking in a glass. She's smart. She'll get scholarships if she applies herself. Besides, she can always start at community college if needed. I suppose you're right. Mom sighed. And she's always been so independent. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, fighting back tears. Independent. Right. Because they'd never given me any other choice. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table, watching Mom cut Caleb's pancakes into perfect little squares while my cold cereal turned to mush. Dad was helping him practice his multiplication tables between bites. 7 times 8? Dad asked. 56. Caleb beamed as Dad ruffled his hair. That's my boy. Keep this up and you'll be top of your class. I cleared my throat. I got an A+ on my biology test yesterday. Mr. Peterson said it was the highest score he's seen in years. That's nice, dear, Mom said absently, wiping syrup from Caleb's chin. Oh, don't forget you're watching Caleb after school today. Dad and I have that meeting with his baseball coach. Something snapped inside me. Actually, I can't. I have study group for the advanced placement exam. Mom finally looked at me, frowning. Since when? Since last month. I told you 3 times. I hadn't, but they never listened anyway. If I pass, I'll be able to take college-level courses next year. Well, you'll have to reschedule, Dad said, not looking up from Caleb's homework. This meeting is important for your brother's future. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. What about my future? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Caleb stopped eating, looking between us with wide eyes. Lila, Mom started, using her warning tone. We've talked about your attitude. No, we haven't talked about anything. My voice cracked. You plan Caleb's entire future while I'm supposed to just… What? Figure everything out on my own? Dad set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. You're being dramatic. We've always supported your education. Really? I laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Then why were you talking about community college for me last night while planning private school for him? Their faces paled. Mom's hand flew to her throat, a nervous tell I'd seen 1,000 times. You were eavesdropping? Dad's voice had that dangerous edge to it. I was existing in my own house, I shot back. But don't worry, I got the message loud and clear. Caleb's the investment and I'm the afterthought. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, ignoring their calls to come back. As I walked to school, I made a decision. They wanted independent? Fine. I'd show them independent. I'd excel so brilliantly they'd have to notice, have to acknowledge me. But more than that, I'd make sure they'd regret every single time they chose him over me. Every single time. That afternoon, I skipped watching Caleb to attend my non-existent study group. Instead, I sat in the library, researching scholarships and planning my escape. Let them deal with their golden child themselves for once. It was time to start playing the long game. The acceptance letter from Stanford arrived on the same day as Caleb's first home run. Guess which one made the family photo album? I stood in the kitchen, clutching the heavy cream envelope while my parents fawned over Caleb's dirt-stained baseball uniform. He was 12 now and I was 17, both of us excelling in our own ways. The difference was, only one of us got standing ovations. Full academic scholarship, I announced, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. They're even covering room and board. Mom glanced up from where she was scrubbing grass stains from Caleb's pants. That's wonderful, honey. Did you hear that, Richard? Lila got into college. Stanford, I corrected. I got into Stanford. Dad was polishing Caleb's trophy. Community college would have been more practical. California's expensive, even with a scholarship. But I won't need your money, I said, letting the words hang in the air like a challenge. I did this on my own. Finally, they both looked at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I saw something flicker across Mom's face, pride? Concern? But before she could speak, Caleb bounded into the kitchen. Coach says I might make varsity next year. As a freshman. Just like that, the moment shattered. They were back to celebrating Caleb, while my acceptance letter lay forgotten on the counter next to yesterday's grocery receipts. Later that night, I overheard them in the study again. Old habits die hard. Stanford, Mom was saying. That's across the country. Who's going to help with Caleb's training schedule? You know how busy we are with his games. She's always been selfish like this, Dad replied. Making decisions without considering the family. I pressed my forehead against the cool wall, letting their words wash over me. Selfish. Right. 'Cause wanting an education was selfish. Because wanting to be seen was selfish. The next morning, I found an envelope on my bed. Inside was a letter from my parents' bank, showing they'd emptied my college savings account, all $5,000 of it. We had to make some adjustments, Dad explained when I confronted him. Caleb's private coaching isn't cheap, and with the travel team expenses. That was my money, I said, my voice hollow. From summer jobs, from Grandma Violet's birthday checks. It was in our name, he corrected. And as your parents, we have to make decisions for the whole family. I looked at the family photos lining his office walls. Caleb's baseball portraits. Caleb's little league teams. Caleb's trophies. There wasn't a single photo of me after age 6. When, I asked quietly, did I stop being part of this family? He sighed that patronizing sigh I'd grown to hate. Don't be dramatic, Lila. You're going to Stanford, isn't that enough? Yeah, I replied, a cold clarity settling over me. It is enough. It's exactly enough to show me where I stand. That evening, I called Grandma Violet. I told her everything, the scholarship, the emptied account, the years of being invisible except when they needed a convenient babysitter. I always knew you'd fly, little bird, she said softly. Just remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. I looked at my acceptance letter again, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead. Stanford. 3,000 miles away from here. From them. I'm done trying to earn their love, I told her. From now on, I'm playing a different game. What game is that? She asked. I smiled, thinking of all the times they dismissed me, underestimated me, forgotten me. The long game, Grandma. The one where they realize exactly what they threw away. After hanging up, I started packing not just clothes and books, but evidence. Bank statements. Old videos. Letters. Someday they'd need something from me. And when that day came, I'd be ready. 'Cause the thing about being invisible? Nobody sees you coming. Stanford was supposed to be my escape, but freedom comes with a price tag I wasn't prepared for. By my second semester, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs with a full course load, running on coffee and determination. My grades started slipping first. Not dramatically, I was still maintaining a 3.5 GPA, but for someone who'd never seen anything below an A, it felt like failure. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was serving coffee at 6 a.m. to make rent, my parents were probably writing another check for Caleb's private batting coach. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Your grandmother had a fall, Mom said, her voice oddly distant. She's okay, but she'll need surgery. We thought you should know. My heart stopped. I'm coming home. That's not necessary, she replied quickly. Focus on your studies. We've got everything handled here. I gripped my phone tighter. She's my grandmother. I'm coming. The flight home maxed out my emergency credit card, but I didn't care. When I walked into Grandma Violet's hospital room, the sight of her looking small and fragile in the stark white bed nearly broke me. Little bird, she smiled weakly. You shouldn't have come all this way. Of course I came. I took her hand, careful of the 4 lines. Why didn't you call me directly? She glanced away. I didn't want to worry you. Your mother said you were struggling with your classes. I froze. What? She mentioned your grades were suffering. That you might lose your scholarship. The room suddenly felt too small. My parents hadn't contacted me once since I'd left for college, but they'd been talking to Grandma Violet about my supposed failures. My grades are fine, I said firmly. And even if they weren't, it would be because I'm working 3 jobs to survive since they emptied my savings account. Violet's face darkened. They did what? Before I could respond, my parents walked in. Mom was carrying fresh flowers. Dad had a newspaper tucked under his arm. They both stopped short when they saw me. Lila, Mom said, recovering first. We told you not to come. Funny how you've suddenly got opinions about my choices. I stood up slowly. Want to tell me why you're spreading lies about my grades? Dad stepped forward. We're concerned about your priorities. Working all these jobs instead of focusing on your studies. My priorities? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich coming from the people who stole my savings to pay for their golden child's batting lessons. Lower your voice, Mom hissed. This isn't the place. They took your savings? Grandma Violet's quiet question cut through the tension like a knife. The money I've been sending you, she continued, her voice growing stronger. For your education. What happened to that? The silence in the room was deafening. My parents wouldn't meet her eyes. What money? I asked slowly. I've been sending them $500 every month since you started college, Violet said. They said you needed help with expenses. The room tilted sideways. $500. Every month. For almost 2 years. That was $12,000, money that had never reached me. You've been... I couldn't even finish the sentence. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the bed rail. All those nights I went hungry, all those times I nearly dropped out because I couldn't afford books. We needed it for Caleb's college fund, Mom whispered. We thought, since you had the scholarship. Get out. Grandma Violet's voice was steel. Both of you, get out of my room right now. They left without arguing, but I barely noticed. I was too busy calculating all the hours I'd worked, all the meals I'd skipped, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd make it through another semester. Little bird, Grandma Violet reached for my hand. We're going to fix this. Together. I looked at her, this woman who'd always been my only real parent, and made a decision. No, Grandma. I'm going to fix this. And they're going to regret every single penny they took. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And I was just getting started. I met Owen at a coffee shop 5 years after graduation. By then, I'd built a life they couldn't touch, senior financial analyst at a tech firm, my own apartment in San Francisco, and enough savings to help Grandma Violet live comfortably. I thought I was done with the past. I was wrong. Owen was different from anyone I'd ever known. He laughed easily, loved deeply, and saw straight through my carefully constructed walls. On our third date, he asked about my family. It's complicated, I said, stirring my coffee. Try me. So I told him everything. About the video, about Caleb, about the stolen money. He listened without judgment, then reached across the table and took my hand. They didn't deserve you, he said simply. We married 6 months later, with only Grandma Violet present. I was happy, truly happy, for the first time in my life. Then came the email that shattered everything. Your brother's been arrested, Mom wrote. We need your help. I deleted it without responding, but more messages followed. Caleb had been caught embezzling from his college baseball team's fundraising account. They needed $50,000 for legal fees. Tell them no, Owen said when I showed him the emails. You don't owe them anything. He was right. I knew he was right. But that night I lay awake, remembering 6-year-old Caleb's gap-toothed smile, his little hand in mine as we walked to the park. Had I become just like them, choosing who deserved love and who didn't? The decision was made for me when I discovered I was pregnant. Looking at that positive test, I made a promise to my unborn child that the cycle of favoritism would end with me. I wrote back to my parents, I'm not your backup plan anymore. Finn was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. He was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. As I held him, I understood with crushing clarity what my parents had failed to give me. He's beautiful, Grandma Violet whispered, touching his cheek. She'd moved to San Francisco after her surgery, becoming the grandmother to Finn that she'd always been to me. Then came the letter. Not an email this time, actual paper, heavy stock, formal letterhead. Dear Mrs. Carter, it began. We represent Richard and Elaine Marlowe in the matter of their petition for bankruptcy protection. They'd mortgaged their house to pay for Caleb's legal defense. Now they were losing everything. The letter ended with a request for financial assistance, citing family obligations. I stood in my kitchen, reading and rereading those words while Finn napped upstairs. Family obligations. The same obligations they'd never felt toward me. Owen found me there hours later, the letter crumpled in my fist. "They want money," I said flatly. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the family photos on our wall, real ones, full of love and laughter. Finn's first smile. Our wedding day. Grandma Violet teaching me to bake cookies. "I don't know," I whispered. "If I help them, I'm enabling more abuse. If I don't." "If you don't, you're protecting yourself and your son," Owen finished. But it wasn't that simple. Because now I had Finn, I understood something terrible. Even the worst parents leave marks on your heart that never quite heal. That night, I wrote 2 checks. One to my parents' mortgage company and one to a trust fund for Finn. Same amount. Different futures. "This isn't forgiveness," I wrote in the accompanying letter. "This is goodbye." I sealed the envelope, knowing this wasn't the end. They'd want more, they always wanted more. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to keep saying no. 'Cause sometimes the hardest part of revenge isn't executing it, it's living with the person you become in the process. I never planned to attend that Thanksgiving dinner. But when Grandma Violet insisted it might be our last chance to all be together, given her recent health issues, I couldn't say no. That's how I found myself back in my childhood home, 5-year-old Finn clutching my hand as we walked through the front door. The house smelled like turkey and tension. Mom hugged Finn enthusiastically while barely glancing at me. Dad and Caleb were watching football, both pretending I wasn't there. Only Grandma Violet's presence in the kitchen kept me from turning around and leaving. "Your old room's exactly how you left it," Mom said, but we all knew that was a lie. It had been Caleb's game room for years. Dinner started quietly enough. Finn, innocent to the undercurrents, chatted happily about kindergarten and his new puppy. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Daddy says Grandma and Grandpa only call Mommy when they need money," Finn announced, reaching for another roll. Like a piggy bank. The silence that followed was deafening. Owen nearly choked on his wine. "What an imagination children have," Mom laughed nervously, but her hands were shaking as she cut her turkey. "Is he wrong?" I asked quietly, placing my fork down. "How many times have you called this year alone? The mortgage, Caleb's legal fees, the car payment." "This isn't the time," Dad warned, but I was done being silenced. "When is the time? When you need another check? When Caleb gets into more trouble?" I turned to my brother. "Did they ever tell you where your college fund really came from?" Caleb looked up from his plate, confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" "They stole my savings. Then they took Grandma's money meant for my education. All for you." My voice was steady, even as my hands trembled. "I worked 3 jobs in college while you got private coaching and new equipment. I nearly dropped out while they were building your future with my present." "That's enough." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "We did what was best for this family." "What family?" I stood up slowly. "The only family member who ever cared about me is sitting right there." I nodded toward Grandma Violet, who was watching with tears in her eyes. "Everything we did," Mom started, "we did because you wanted a son," I finished. "I know. I saw the video when I was 6, remember? Finally, our family will be complete." "Well, congratulations. You got your perfect son. How's that working out for you?" Caleb pushed back from the table. "This isn't my fault." "No," I agreed. "It's theirs. But you were happy to benefit from it, weren't you?" "Lila," Owen said softly, placing a hand on my arm. Finn had gone very quiet, his eyes wide. "I'm done," I announced, reaching for my purse. I pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Inside is documentation of every penny you've taken from me over the years, including Grandma's stolen money, plus records of all the times you've asked for help since. I've sent copies to my lawyer. Are you threatening us?" Dad's face had gone red. "No. I'm setting you free. You don't have to pretend to care about me anymore." No more awkward holidays, no more reluctant phone calls when you need money. I picked up Finn, who buried his face in my neck. But understand this, you will never treat my son the way you treated me. He will never know what it feels like to be the unwanted child. Lila, please, Mom was crying now. We're still your parents. No, I said softly. You're just the people who taught me exactly what kind of mother I never want to be. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. I've set up a trust fund for Finn. One that you can never touch. Because that's what real parents do. They protect their children's future instead of stealing it. As we walked out, Grandma Violet joined us, her head held high. Behind us, I could hear Mom's sobbing and Dad's angry voice, but for the first time in my life, their emotions weren't my responsibility. In the car, Finn looked at me with serious eyes. Are we still going to have Thanksgiving next year? Yes, baby, I smiled, meeting Owen's supportive gaze in the rearview mirror. But from now on, we're only celebrating with people who know how to love. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I received a thick envelope from my parents' lawyer. Inside was a deed to their house, signed over to me. They declared bankruptcy and moved to a smaller place closer to Caleb's new job at a local sporting goods store. The golden child had fallen, and they'd fallen with him. I sat in Grandma Violet's garden, watching Finn help her plant spring bulbs, the envelope heavy in my lap. You know, Violet said, brushing dirt from her hands, your mother was just like them, her parents, I mean. I looked up sharply. What? Oh yes. They favored her brother too. That's why I tried so hard with you. She settled into the garden chair beside me. I watched history repeating itself, and I couldn't stop it. Just like I couldn't stop your mother from becoming exactly what she hated. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought I was alone in this story. But here was Grandma Violet, carrying the same scars, fighting the same battles. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She smiled sadly. Would it have helped? Some lessons we have to learn on our own. The important thing is what we do with them. Finn ran over, proudly showing us a worm he'd found. His eyes were bright with discovery, his hands dirty from honest work. In that moment, I saw what real inheritance looked like, not money or property, but the capacity to love freely, to find joy in simple things. Later that evening, Owen found me in our home office, staring at old family photos. What are you thinking? He asked, massaging my shoulders. I'm thinking about cycles, I said. About how easy it is to become what hurt us. But you didn't, he reminded me. You broke the cycle. The next day, I received an unexpected visit from Caleb. He looked older, tired, less like the golden child and more like someone learning hard truths. I didn't know, he said simply, standing awkwardly in my living room. About the money, about what they did to you. I should have known. You were a kid, I replied. We both were. I want to pay you back, he continued. It'll take time, but... Keep it, I interrupted. Use it to be better than they taught us to be. He left with tears in his eyes and a promise to be a better uncle to Finn. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but I was surprised to find that it didn't matter anymore. My happiness didn't depend on their redemption. That night, I wrote 2 letters. The first was to my parents, returning the deed to their house. Keep it, I wrote. Consider it payment for teaching me exactly what kind of parent I never want to be. The second letter was to Finn, to be opened on his 18th birthday. In it, I explained everything, the video, the stolen money, the years of neglect. Not to burden him with our family's darkness, but to show him how love can light the way out. The greatest revenge, I wrote, isn't in making others suffer, but in refusing to let their choices define who you become. As I sealed the envelope, I heard Finn's laughter floating up from downstairs, where he was baking cookies with Grandma Violet. Owen's warm chuckle joined in, and suddenly I understood something profound. Revenge had never been about hurting them. It had been about healing myself. I placed both letters in my desk drawer and went downstairs to join my family, my real family, built on choice and love rather than obligation and blood. Kitchen was warm and fragrant with vanilla, and Finn's face lit up when he saw me. Mommy! We made cookies. They're a little messy, Owen apologized, flour dusting his hair. They're perfect, I said and meant it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't in getting even, but in getting free. And freedom, I've learned, tastes a lot like slightly burnt cookies made with loving hands and joyful hearts.